Hello, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. The Grand Meridian Hotel in New York City gleamed under the autumn sun, its glass facade reflecting the frantic pulse of Manhattan. Inside, the air buzzed with the energy of the Global Young Entrepreneurs Conference, the clink of champagne glasses, bursts of laughter, and the ambitious pitches of rising talents. Lena Quinn climbed out of a beat-up Honda Civic she had borrowed, the rear door dented and scratched. Her oversized sunglasses slid down her nose as she tugged an old leather portfolio from the passenger seat. Her outfit, ripped jeans, a second-hand blazer, and neon sneakers, screamed creative more than corporate, but the confident stride in her step and the sparkle in her eye said she belonged here. At 27, Lena was a fashion designer and the founder of a scrappy startup dedicated to bold, eco-friendly clothing. Her designs were daring, sustainable, and more than a little quirky, much like Lena herself. She was the kind of person who could charm a stranger into buying a glittery jumpsuit at 8 in the morning. But today, her nerves buzzed under her skin. This conference was her shot at finding an investor and taking her brand global. As she slammed the car door shut, her gaze snagged on a man standing near the hotel entrance. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a sleek black jacket and dark jeans, sunglasses hiding most of his face. He leaned casually against a pillar, twirling a car key around his finger. He looked powerful. But to Lena, distracted and stressed, he looked like a valet. A really stylish, rebellious valet who refused to wear the standard-issue red uniform everyone else was running around in. "Hey, you!" Lena called, jogging over while jingling her keys. Without hesitation, she shoved her keys and a crumpled $2 bill into his hand. "Park it quick, please. Careful with the brakes. It's a loaner, and my friend will murder me if there's a scratch." She flashed him a bright smile and turned toward the revolving doors without waiting for an answer. "Thanks, lifesaver." The man froze, slowly closing his fingers around the keys and the bill. He pulled down his sunglasses, revealing sharp gray eyes that narrowed at her. For a second, Lena thought she caught a flicker of amusement, or was it irritation, across his chiseled face. But she had already disappeared through the revolving door, her mind racing ahead to her presentation. The man said nothing. He simply watched her walk away, his expression as cold and unreadable as the Hudson River in winter. Inside, the Grand Meridian's ballroom shimmered with tailored suits and polished smiles. Lena straightened her blazer, feeling wildly underdressed but refusing to be intimidated. She found a seat near the stage, her battered portfolio stuffed with sketches and fabric swatches resting in her lap. The opening speech was about to begin, and the room fell into a respectful hush as the host took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer said, "please welcome the pioneer behind Blackwood Dynamics, the tech empire revolutionizing AI and sustainable energy, Mr. Julian Blackwood." Polite applause rippled through the crowd as a figure strode onto the stage. Lena's heart stopped. There, under the spotlight, was the valet she had just tossed her car keys and $2 at. Same sleek jacket, same cold, commanding presence. Only now the entire room seemed to orbit around him, every gaze pinned to the 32-year-old CEO, whose fortune could probably buy half of Manhattan. "Oh no," Lena whispered, sinking lower in her seat. Her face burned as she replayed her words. "Park it quick. Careful with the brakes." She had just bossed around one of the most powerful men in tech like he was hotel staff. And worse, she'd tipped him $2. Julian Blackwood's voice cut through her mortification, low, firm, and commanding, as he launched into a speech about innovation and disruption. His gaze swept the audience, and for a terrifying moment, it landed on her. Lena could have sworn the corner of his mouth twitched, but his face remained unreadable. She sank even lower, silently begging the floor to swallow her whole. The speech, mercifully, was short, but Lena's ordeal was far from over. As the crowd dispersed for a networking break, she bolted to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. "You're fine," she muttered to her reflection. "He probably gets mistaken for a valet all the time, right?" What she didn't know was that her next encounter with Julian Blackwood would turn this mortifying moment into just the beginning of something much, much bigger. Lena Quinn sat hunched in a corner seat inside the Grand Meridian Ballroom, trying to make herself as small and invisible as a rabbit in its burrow. The room still buzzed with chatter after Julian Blackwood's speech. The same CEO she had just mistaken for a valet and oh so generously tipped $2. Every time someone mentioned his name or Blackwood dynamics, Lena felt like she was roasting alive. She told herself to stay silent, absolutely no attracting attention. If she could just survive today, she would go home, dive under her covers, and pretend the whole disaster had never happened. But fate, as usual, wasn't on her side. As the conference transitioned into a networking session, a woman with a clipboard came hurrying toward her. "Ms. Quinn? Lena Quinn?" the woman asked, flashing a harried smile as if she was racing through a never-ending checklist. "Congratulations, you've been selected to join the exclusive dinner tonight with Mr. Blackwood and several major investors." Lena stared up at her, blinking like she'd been slapped with a bucket of ice water. "What? No, there must be a mistake. I didn't sign up for anything." "No mistake," the woman chirped, flipping quickly through her clipboard. "Your name's right here on the VIP list. 7 o'clock sharp, Meridian Room. Don't be late." And before Lena could utter another word, she rushed off, leaving Lena frozen with her heart pounding out of her chest. "VIP?" Lena muttered to herself, hugging her battered leather portfolio like it was a life raft. "This has to be a mistake. Who would invite the girl who called the CEO a valet to dinner?" She seriously considered making a run for it, claiming food poisoning, faking a broken elevator, anything. But then she thought about the investors who would be there. This was her chance, maybe her only chance, to pitch her sustainable fashion brand. If she bailed now, she might as well kiss her startup dream goodbye. "Okay," she breathed, psyching herself up. "Just sit still, smile, eat politely, absolutely no speaking unless spoken to. You can do this, Lena." At exactly 7 o'clock, Lena stepped into the Meridian Room, still wearing the same ripped jeans and secondhand blazer from that morning, feeling about as polished as a soggy French fry. The room was elegantly set, soft candlelight, the clink of wine glasses, the faint scent of hors d'oeuvres. The round table had just 8 seats, 4 investors, 2 other young entrepreneurs, Julian Blackwood, and, horrifyingly, her. Lena snuck into the seat furthest from Julian, praying to blend into the wallpaper. She dropped her portfolio by her feet, smoothed her bangs, and told herself, "Be invisible. Don't say anything stupid." But Julian Blackwood had a sixth sense for locating her. Just as everyone settled in, his voice cut through the low murmur of conversation, smooth, deep, unmistakably amused. "Ms. Quinn," he said, locking his storm gray eyes onto her. "So nice to see you again. The woman who was very generous with me this morning." Every head at the table swiveled toward Lena, curiosity lighting up their faces like stage spotlights. Lena's cheeks flamed. He just brought up the $2 in front of everyone. She swallowed hard, forcing a tight smile. "Yes, just a small misunderstanding," she said, her voice a little too high. "Nothing worth mentioning, Mr. Blackwood." Julian arched an eyebrow, a small twitch tugging at the corner of his mouth. Half smirk, half something else. "Oh, I disagree," he said smoothly. $2 is a significant investment. I'm still deciding what to buy with it." A few polite chuckles broke out around the table. Lena wanted to sink through the floor, but she wasn't the kind of girl to let someone get the upper hand that easily. She took a deep breath, tilted her head, and shot him a sly smile. "Well then, Mr. Blackwood," she said sweetly, "might I suggest a cup of coffee? I hear valet work can be exhausting." The table burst out laughing, genuine, hearty laughter this time, and some of the tension dissolved. An older investor with a red tie leaned forward grinning. "Ms. Quinn, you have to tell us, what exactly happened this morning?" Lena nearly choked on her water. "Oh, it's nothing really," she said, waving a hand as if to shoo the topic away. "I was in a rush, and Mr. Blackwood just looked very professional at the entrance. Anyone would have thought the same, right?" She darted a glance at Julian, hoping he would let it go. But he was clearly enjoying himself. He leaned back in his chair, lazily twirling his wine glass. "Professional," he echoed, that teasing note back in his voice. If I recall correctly, Ms. Quinn was very specific about me being careful with the brakes. A loaner car, wasn't it? Lena bit her lip, half mortified, half fighting back a laugh at how absurd this was getting. But there was a gleam of mischief in his eyes that caught her off guard. Feeling daring, she shrugged. Well, I just wanted to make sure you did the job right, she quipped. I mean, if you're going to accept a $2 tip, you might as well park the car properly. The table erupted again, even Julian chuckling under his breath as he lifted his glass. The mood eased even more. The investors, now properly charmed, turned to ask Lena about her brand. She seized the opportunity, passionately pitching her vision for bold, sustainable fashion made from recycled materials. Clothing that wasn't just beautiful, but meaningful. The investors nodded, clearly intrigued. Still, every time Lena spoke, she could feel Julian's gaze on her. Steady, unreadable, and entirely too distracting. Trying to stay focused, she chattered her way through the questions, until her mouth, as usual, got ahead of her brain. When asked about her opinion on tech companies leading the green movement, she launched into a spirited commentary. Oh, there are some great ones, like SolarTech and Greenwave. But Blackwood Dynamics ... She hesitated too late. I mean, sure, their tech is amazing, but the way they run things? Kind of old school, like a giant machine without a soul. And from what I've heard, the corporate culture is, a bit like a dictatorship. The table fell dead silent. Lena's stomach twisted into a knot. Across the table, Julian rested his chin in his hand, smiling in a way that was both dangerous and darkly amused. Dictatorship? He repeated softly, voice as smooth as silk but carrying an unmistakable edge. That's a unique assessment, Ms. Quinn. Do you have much experience with dictatorships? Lena gulped, frantically backpedaling. No, I mean, just from the outside, obviously, she squeaked. I'm sure it's incredibly creative and nurturing on the inside. Really, just amazing. She ended with a desperate smile. No one laughed. Julian tilted his head slightly, never taking his eyes off her. I'll be sure to keep your enlightening feedback in mind, he said smoothly. The investors quickly shifted the conversation elsewhere, mercifully sparing her, and Lena buried her face in her plate, vowing never to speak again. But even as the night wore on, she could feel Julian's gaze on her, intense, curious, and unsettlingly amused. When the dinner finally ended, Lena was the first to leap from her chair, clutching her portfolio. She nearly sprinted toward the exit, eager to escape. But just as she passed through the doors, she heard his voice behind her. Low, soft, dangerous. Ms. Quinn, he called. She turned. Julian was standing casually in the doorway, hands in his pockets, that piercing gaze locked onto hers. You should be careful what you say, he said, voice like velvet-wrapped steel. Not everyone is as forgiving as I am. Lena opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She just nodded stiffly and hurried away, her heart hammering in her chest. She had no idea that for Julian Blackwood, tonight was only the beginning. The beginning of a series of collisions between them that neither of them could walk away from. Lena Quinn stood in front of the glittering glass tower of Blackwood Dynamics in the heart of Manhattan, feeling like she was about to step into the lion's den. The building soared into the sky, sleek, cold, and modern, just like its owner, Julian Blackwood. She clutched her battered leather portfolio tighter, took a deep breath, and told herself, You've got this, Lena. It's just 1 month working under the billionaire you accidentally mistook for a valet. No big deal. Totally survivable. It had all started with an unexpected email 2 days after the Grand Meridian disaster. Lena had nearly spilled her coffee when she read the subject line, Congratulations, Quinn Sustainable Fashion, selected for the Blackwood Dynamics Innovation Program. Her tiny Brooklyn-based fashion startup had somehow been chosen for a month-long pilot sponsorship by one of the world's top tech giants. A dream come true until she read the fine print. The CEO of each selected startup will work on site at Blackwood Dynamics under the direct supervision of Mr. Julian Blackwood. Lena had reread that line at least 10 times, hoping she had misunderstood. But no, it was crystal clear. She was going to work directly under Julian Blackwood, The man she had tipped $2 and accidentally insulted in front of a room full of investors. Naturally, she'd called her best friend Mia in a panic. "He's obviously doing this to torture me," Lena wailed, sprawled on her couch. "Why else pick a teeny-tiny startup like mine? He wants to make me suffer." Mia giggled over the phone. "Or maybe he finds you entertaining. I mean, who else has the guts to call Blackwood Dynamics a dictatorship to the CEO's face?" "You're not helping, Mia," Lena grumbled, though a tiny part of her wondered. Was Julian playing some twisted game of cat and mouse with her? Either way, the opportunity was too good to pass up. She needed funding. She needed infrastructure. And most importantly, she needed to prove her brand wasn't just a pipe dream. On her first day at Blackwood Dynamics, Lena walked into the marble-floored lobby feeling like a goldfish tossed into a shark tank. Suits zipped around like clockwork soldiers. She wore a floral maxi dress, worn leather boots, and her trusty blazer, sticking out like a neon sign in a sea of black. A young assistant with a tight ponytail greeted her. "Lena Quinn, right?" she asked, polite but clearly curious. "Mr. Blackwood is expecting you." Lena nodded, trying to muster a confident smile. As the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, 42 stories up, her nerves threatened to betray her. The assistant opened the door to Julian Blackwood's office, and Lena almost dropped her portfolio. There he was, sitting behind a sleek glass desk, sunlight spilling across his sharp features. Black suit, no tie, calm, commanding, dangerous. His storm gray eyes flicked up from his computer, locking onto her. "Ms. Quinn," he said, voice smooth and deep like velvet over stone. "Welcome to Blackwood Dynamics." Lena swallowed hard, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I'm very grateful for the opportunity." Julian rose to his full, intimidating height and stepped around the desk, folding his arms casually, a hint of a smirk playing at his lips. "I just want to see," he said, "if you can park your project as quickly and safely as you promised." Lena stiffened, so he was holding a grudge. She cleared her throat, refusing to back down. "Oh, I'm an excellent parker, Mr. Blackwood. But if this office starts smelling like tuna, don't blame me." Julian's eyebrow lifted, clearly caught off guard by her sass. He gestured to a small desk tucked into the corner. "That's your spot. I expect you to work efficiently." Grinding her teeth, Lena made her way to the desk, plopping into the chair. This was going to be a long month. The first few days at Blackwood Dynamics turned into a series of mini skirmishes between Lena and Julian, two gladiators in an endless match. Lena, with her candid, slightly chaotic nature, simply did not fit into the stiff, pristine environment of the corporation. Julian, by contrast, was the living embodiment of precision. Everything under control, everything in its place. The clash was inevitable. On the third day, Lena brought in her homemade lunch, a tuna salad she loved. She popped open the Tupperware without a second thought, completely unaware that the smell was rapidly infiltrating the entire executive floor. Julian, reviewing a quarterly report, suddenly froze. He lifted his head, nose wrinkling slightly. "Ms. Quinn," he said icily, "what is that smell?" Lena, her mouth full of salad, blinked innocently. "Tuna? Want some? I made it myself. Delicious." Julian looked at her as if she had offered him a brick. "I don't eat fish, and that smell is assaulting the entire floor." Flushing, Lena snapped the lid back on. "Sorry, I didn't know you hated tuna. Next time I'll bring a veggie sandwich. Promise." Julian said nothing, turning back to his screen, but Lena swore she saw his shoulders shake slightly. Was he trying not to laugh? "This man is impossible," Lena grumbled to herself. The next battle erupted when Lena noticed how utterly lifeless Julian's office was. His desk was unnervingly clean, his pens arranged in perfect military formation, no decorations in sight. To a designer like Lena, it was practically a crime. One lunch break, while Julian was in a meeting, Lena snuck in a tiny cactus and scattered neon post-it notes across his desk. Each note bore cheerful messages like, "Smile, life's too short," or "Today's the day to shine." She even doodled a cat wearing a cowboy hat and stuck it right in front of his monitor. When Julian returned, he stopped dead. Lena peeked up from her portfolio. watching him examine the cactus like it might explode. He skimmed through the post-its, pausing at the cat drawing. Turning slowly toward her, his face unreadable, he said, "Ms. Quinn, is this my office or your personal art exhibit?" Lena shrugged with a wicked grin. "Just adding a little personality, Mr. Blackwood." This place was starting to feel like a morgue. Julian set the cactus down. Instead of exploding, he merely stacked the post-its neatly into a pile. "If I wanted personality, Ms. Quinn," he said dryly, "I would hire an interior decorator. Now back to work." Lena blinked, stunned he hadn't freaked out. She had no idea that later that night, after everyone had gone, Julian sat back, stared at the cactus for a long moment, and actually secretly smiled. Their constant skirmishes, small as they were, began to chip away at Julian's frosty exterior. Lena's unfiltered energy seemed to poke at parts of him long buried under duty and control. One afternoon, while presenting her smart fabric proposal, Lena accidentally knocked over her coffee, sending it spilling across the table, straight toward his laptop. Panic-stricken, she lunged to mop it up with her blazer sleeve. Oh no, I'm so sorry," she babbled. "I'll clean it up, I swear." "Ms. Quinn," Julian interrupted calmly, handing her a handkerchief from his jacket. "Stop, before you knock the whole desk over." Lena grabbed the handkerchief, cheeks blazing. "Thanks. I swear I wasn't trying to destroy your office." For the first time, she caught a flicker of warmth in his usually steely eyes. "I know," he said softly, "but next time, keep the coffee at a safe distance." Heart hammering in her chest, Lena returned to her desk, feeling a strange buzz she couldn't shake. By the end of the first week, Lena realized working with Julian wasn't complete hell. He was strict, yes, but he listened. When she pitched her idea for recycled fabric embedded with weather sensors, he didn't just nod. He offered thoughtful feedback, even suggesting small tweaks. He actually gets it, she thought in wonder. And slowly, grudgingly, she began to respect him. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that Julian was testing her. Every sharp look, every teasing comment seemed to dare her. "Are you tough enough to survive here, Lena Quinn?" And Lena, stubborn to her core, was determined to prove she wasn't just good at parking cars. She could drive her dreams all the way to the finish line, even if it meant crashing headfirst into Julian Blackwood along the way. What neither of them realized yet was this. While they were busy trying to outwit each other, something much bigger and much messier was quietly, inexorably beginning to grow. 3 weeks into Lena Quinn's exile at Blackwood Dynamics, the 42nd floor no longer looked like the pristine war room it once was. It had become a battlefield of color, quite literally. Her neon post-its still clung to Julian's desk, despite his attempts to stack them neatly. The tiny cactus sat loyally by his monitor, a silent witness to her chaotic invasion. And Julian, though he would never admit it, had started growing used to the whirlwind Lena brought into his meticulously ordered world. Julian Blackwood was known for many things: discipline, control, and an emotional range somewhere between neutral and stone cold. But Lena, with her disarming honesty and zero-filter attitude, was chipping away at that steel wall, if only just hairline cracks. For now. One Monday morning, Lena strolled into the office, her tote bag covered in cartoon cats and stuffed with new samples of recycled fabric. She dumped them onto the desk with the energy of a hurricane. "I have a new idea," she announced brightly. "Weather-adaptive jackets. They automatically adjust thickness based on temperature. Genius, right?" Julian, immersed in emails, barely glanced up. "Sounds intriguing. Do you have data to back up its feasibility? Or is this just another inspired moment of yours?" Lena pulled a face but didn't back down. She slapped a stack of papers onto his desk. "Here, cost analysis and preliminary tests from my studio. I'm not just winging it, you know?" Julian skimmed through the documents with unnerving speed, then nodded once. Instead of offering praise, he commented, "Your presentation is sloppy. Improve the structure next time. I don't like disorganization." Lena slumped dramatically into her chair. "God, you're like a robot. Doesn't being this uptight exhaust you?" Julian arched a brow, a glint of annoyance flashing in his steely eyes. "Not everyone," he said coolly, "enjoys living in a Colorful zoo, Ms. Quinn. Lena burst out laughing, utterly unfazed. Zoo? Thanks, I'll take that as a compliment. But seriously, Blackwood, you need to loosen up. Keep this tension up, and you're going to snap. Julian didn't respond, simply turning back to his screen, but Lena noticed his grip on his pen tighten ever so slightly. Score one for her, she'd crack the Ice King. Again. And it kept happening. One day during lunch, Lena brought a tiny Bluetooth speaker and blasted indie music throughout the office. Julian, in the middle of a $1 million call, had to pause mid-sentence and stare daggers at her. Ms. Quinn, he growled, voice dangerously low, turn that off. Now. Lena, still bouncing to the beat, blinked innocently. Music helps boost productivity. This office is suffocating. You know what's more stressful? Julian replied, stalking toward her desk. Listening to your indie playlist while trying to finalize a contract. Grinning, Lena obediently shut off the speaker. All right, I surrender. Next time, I'll bring headphones. Happy, boss? Julian scowled at her, but when he turned away, Lena swore she caught the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth. He was frustrated, but not furious. And that, for Julian Blackwood, was practically flirting. But things shifted one quiet Wednesday afternoon. Lena was making coffee in the pantry when she overheard Julian's voice drifting through a slightly ajar door. His tone, usually cool and cutting, was low and shaking. Yes, doctor, I understand. How bad is it? I'll make arrangements to visit as soon as possible. Thank you. Lena froze, her mug hovering midair. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but something about Julian's voice, raw, vulnerable, anchored her in place. When she returned to the office, Julian sat at his desk, fingers pressed to his temple, staring blankly at his screen. For the first time, he looked fragile. Hesitating only a second, Lena crossed the room and spoke gently. Hey, are you okay? Julian snapped his gaze up, all ice and shields again. Personal matter, he said curtly, shutting down any further questions. Lena bit her lip but didn't move. Instead, she dragged a chair opposite him and sat down. Look, I know you don't exactly want my sympathy, but if you need someone to yell at or throw post-its at, I'm here. For a long moment, Julian stared at her. And then, he sighed. The sound was weary and human. My younger brother, he said quietly. He's receiving treatment in London. It's serious. Lena blinked, taken aback by his honesty. I'm so sorry. Is he going to be all right? Julian shrugged stiffly, but pain flickered in his eyes. We're hoping, but it's uncertain. Not trusting herself to say the right thing, Lena did the only thing she knew how. She lightened the mood. She fished a chocolate bar from her bag and plopped it onto his desk. Here, she said, chocolate makes everything slightly better. Scientific fact. Julian looked at the candy, then at her, something unreadable flashing in his gaze. You solve all your problems with snacks? Lena grinned. Not always. Sometimes I bring cacti, or indie rock. This time Julian actually chuckled, a low, rough sound that made Lena's heart trip over itself. Embarrassed, she fled back to her desk, hiding her blush behind her laptop. What the heck is happening to me? Why do I care this much about a grumpy billionaire? From that moment, Lena saw Julian differently, not just as the infuriating, immaculate CEO, but as a brother worried for his sibling, a man carrying invisible burdens alone. And against her better judgment, she started to care. Julian, for his part, found himself increasingly distracted. He was used to women either fearing him or fawning over his money. Lena did neither. She challenged him, teased him, left cactus plants and candy on his desk without batting an eye. And maddeningly, he couldn't bring himself to push her away. One evening, while working late on a prototype for the Smart Jacket project, they both reached for the same spool of conductive thread. Their hands brushed. Both froze. Julian cleared his throat, voice suddenly hoarse. Careful, Ms. Quinn. You're about to wreck the sample. Lena laughed awkwardly, retreating. Right. The thread. Definitely about the thread. But they both knew it wasn't about the thread at all. By the end of that week, Lena no longer saw Julian as the uptight CEO. He was still infuriatingly meticulous, yes, but she started noticing the way he actually listened when she spoke, the faint smile he fought when she joked. And Julian realized he had started to look forward to her laughter, her chaos, her stubbornness that refused to be tamed. They weren't just co-workers anymore. They were teammates. But underneath their tentative alliance buzzed something far more dangerous. Something bigger than any project either had dared to imagine. Something that was only just beginning. The 42nd floor of Blackwood Dynamics was bathed in the soft golden glow of a Friday sunset, the vast glass windows framing the Manhattan skyline like a living painting. Lena Quinn sat at her desk, surrounded by floral-printed fabric swatches and sketches for the new tech fashion line. She was biting her pen, mumbling cost estimates to herself, when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number popped up. "Hey Lena, it's Brad. Got some exciting news for you. Free to meet?" Lena frowned. Brad Thornton, a former investor and persistent admirer from her college days. He'd once dogged her every step with smug smiles and unwelcome dinner invitations. She had cut off contact long ago, but apparently Brad had kept tabs on her startup journey. Without much thought, she typed back, "Hey Brad, super busy. Please send your proposal via email." She hit send and turned back to her work, dismissing it from her mind. But Brad Thornton was not someone who took no for an answer. The very next day, Brad showed up at Blackwood Dynamics. He strolled into the sleek marble lobby wearing a navy suit, hair gelled to perfection, and a smirk that screamed entitlement. Lena was in a small conference room, presenting the prototype of her smart jacket to Julian, when a soft knock sounded at the door. "Mr. Blackwood," the assistant said, glancing curiously at Lena. "There's a Mr. Brad Thornton here to see Ms. Quinn." Lena stiffened. Julian, examining a microsensor, looked up slowly, his expression sharpening like a blade. "Thornton?" His voice was deceptively calm, but Lena could feel the tension ripple in the air. "Probably about some investment pitch," Lena said lightly, forcing a casual tone. "I'll be quick." Julian didn't reply, only nodded once, but his storm gray eyes followed her out of the room with unsettling intensity. Brad was waiting in the lounge, leaning casually against the glass wall, exuding the charm of someone far too used to getting what he wanted. "Lena," he greeted with open arms like they were old friends. "You look even more radiant than back in college." Lena folded her arms. "Thanks. Why are you here, Brad?" Brad flashed a dazzling smile, stepping closer. "Straight to business. I like it. Listen." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "I know you're working with Blackwood Dynamics, but I have a better offer. My firm wants to invest big in your brand. International expansion. Top-tier resources, the works. Only one condition. You leave Blackwood." Lena blinked. "Leave Blackwood? Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Brad said smoothly. "Julian Blackwood doesn't get you the way I do. Team up with me, Lena. You'll go farther, faster." Something about his tone and the way he looked at her like a commodity made Lena's skin crawl. She took a breath, about to refuse, when a cold, dangerous voice cut through the air behind her. "She's not going anywhere." Lena spun around, heart hammering. Julian stood there, tall and menacing in a black shirt, hands casually tucked into his pockets. The room dropped several degrees. Brad offered a strained laugh. "Mr. Blackwood, just talking business. Nothing personal." Julian strode forward, stopping beside Lena, so close she could feel the heat radiating off him. "Really?" Julian's voice was a lethal whisper. "Because it sounded like you were trying to poach my partner." Brad held up his hands in mock surrender. "No offense meant. Lena's free to choose her own path." Julian smiled, a chilling, predatory curve of his lips. "She already has. She doesn't need another investor. She has me." Lena's mouth dropped open. "Excuse me?" She whirled on Julian, cheeks burning with anger. "I beg your pardon. I don't belong to anyone, Julian. I choose my own investors and my own future." Julian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Brad, sensing the escalating tension, took a step back. "Well, I'll leave you two to it. Lena, my offer stands. Call me if you want real freedom." He winked and sauntered off, leaving a smoking silence behind him. Back in the office, Lena exploded. She slammed the door shut and planted her hands on her hips, glaring at Julian. Who the hell do you think you are, Blackwood? The only backing I need? I'm not some prize you can claim. Julian crossed his arms, face unreadable but eyes flashing. You think I'd let you walk into a deal with Thornton? He's not interested in your brand, Lena. He's interested in you, for all the wrong reasons. Lena barked a sharp laugh, stepping closer until they were toe-to-toe. Oh, and you're different, huh? You kept me here because of my talent, or because you enjoy this twisted little power play. Don't think I forgot about that $2 fiasco. Julian's expression darkened, for once letting real emotion crack through. You think this is a game to me? You think you're some pawn I'm amusing myself with? His voice dropped dangerously low. I chose your project because it's brilliant, because you're brilliant. But if you want to leave, go ahead. I won't stop you. Lena reeled. For a moment, anger and hurt battled inside her. Fine, she snapped. Maybe I will leave. I don't need you or your dictator company. She grabbed her battered leather bag, storming toward the door. But a strong hand caught her wrist. She gasped as Julian yanked her back, spinning her to face him. They were chest to chest, so close she could see the tiny flecks of silver in his stormy eyes. His breathing was ragged, his hand still gripping hers. Lena, he said, voice rough, almost broken, if you walk out that door, I don't know if I'll be able to let you go. Lena opened her mouth, to argue, to scream, to do something. But Julian didn't give her the chance. He kissed her. It was not polite, it was not planned. It was raw and fierce, full of frustration, longing, and something dangerously close to desperation. His mouth was warm against hers, his hand still gripping her wrist like a lifeline. Lena froze, her heart slamming against her ribs, clutching her bag as if it could anchor her to reality. The kiss only lasted a few wild, disorienting seconds. But when Julian finally pulled away, both of them were gasping for air. He stared at her, eyes dark with emotion and regret. What the hell was that? Lena whispered, voice shaking. Julian released her wrist and stepped back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't know, he muttered. You should go, if that's what you want. Lena stood there stunned as he turned his back on her. Without another word, she fled. That night, back at her tiny Brooklyn apartment, Lena lay sprawled on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Julian Blackwood had kissed her, not because he was playing a game, not because of power or control, but because he couldn't not. And the terrifying part? Lena wasn't sure she wanted to forget that kiss. Meanwhile, back at the darkened offices of Blackwood Dynamics, Julian sat alone, staring at the glittering skyline. He held a half-melted chocolate bar in his hand, the one Lena had left on his desk weeks ago. For a man who had built his empire on control, he realized with a bitter smile. Lena Quinn was the one variable he couldn't predict, the one risk he wanted to take, and neither of them knew. That kiss was only the beginning of something much bigger and far, far messier than either had bargained for. Lena Quinn's tiny Brooklyn apartment glowed with soft, warm light that evening, but her heart felt as cold as the October wind outside. She sat cross-legged on the couch, her laptop resting on her thighs, a forgotten cup of tea cooling beside her. Julian Blackwood's kiss still haunted her, looping through her mind like a melody she couldn't silence. She had replayed that moment 100 times, how he had pulled her back, the confusion and intensity in his eyes, the burning feel of his lips on hers. And every time her heart twisted tighter with anger, confusion, and something more dangerous she didn't dare name. Determined to distract herself, Lena opened her laptop and began skimming through project files tied to Blackwood Dynamics. An email from Julian's assistant, sent days ago, caught her eye. Attached was the final version of the sponsorship contract she had signed at the beginning of the program. Only tonight, in her emotional turmoil, did she decide to actually read it line by line. She skimmed through the standard terms about funding, obligations, benefits. Everything seemed routine, until she reached a tiny clause buried on page 7, printed in minuscule font, almost hidden among the legal jargon. Lena squinted, rereading it twice to be sure. The clause stated that if the project failed or was terminated, Blackwood Dynamics would claim full ownership of all intellectual property, including Lena's original designs and innovations. A chill ran through her veins. She reread it, hoping she misunderstood. But no, it was clear. If her project failed, or if Blackwood terminated the partnership, she would lose everything. Her brand, her designs, her dreams she had fought for over 3 years. She shoved the laptop away, her hands trembling. "No way," she whispered. "Julian, he knew about this." She remembered the kiss, the way he had said, "If you leave, I won't be able to stop myself." She had thought he meant emotionally, that he cared. But now, the contract clause felt like a slap across the face. "He played me," she said bitterly. "He invested emotions to control me." Lena stood, pacing the cramped living room, fighting back tears. She had trusted Julian, let him slip past her defenses, into her heart, and now it felt like betrayal. The next morning, Lena marched into Blackwood Dynamics with cold resolve. She wore a simple black sweater and jeans. Gone was her usual vibrant energy. No design samples, no colorful swatches, just a plain white envelope in her hand. Julian was at his desk, as always, the morning sun highlighting the sharp angles of his face. He looked up when Lena entered, and for a moment, something warm flickered in his eyes, until he registered her expression. "Ms. Quinn," he said, voice low and steady, "is something wrong?" Lena didn't bother with small talk. She placed the envelope on his desk and pushed it toward him. "I'm withdrawing from the project. This is my resignation. I'm done working with Blackwood." Julian stiffened, his jaw tightening. He picked up the envelope but didn't open it, his gaze fixed on her. "What are you doing, Lena? Is this about Thornton?" Lena let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, not Brad. It's about you, Julian. I read the contract, the clause about intellectual property. You thought I was too stupid to notice? That you could just steal my company if this didn't work out?" Julian's brows furrowed deeply, genuine confusion flashing across his face. "What are you talking about? I never—" "Don't play dumb," Lena snapped, her voice rising. "I trusted you, Julian. I thought you cared. But it was all part of the plan, wasn't it? Even the kiss." Her voice cracked. "Just another tactic to keep me under your thumb." Julian surged to his feet, circling his desk to face her, anger and hurt flaring in his eyes. "Lena, you're wrong. I never intended to take anything from you. That clause is standard. It's in every Blackwood contract. I didn't draft it, and I never meant for it to be enforced against you." "Standard?" Lena's laugh was hollow. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why let me sign something that could destroy everything I've built? You think I'm just a naive girl who only knows how to sketch pretty dresses?" Julian clenched his fists, visibly struggling for control. "I don't think that. Lena, I made a mistake. I should have reviewed the contract more closely. But you have to believe me. I would never hurt you." For a brief, painful second, Lena wanted to believe him. But the hurt was too raw, the betrayal too fresh. She turned away, her voice trembling. "I can't trust you anymore. Goodbye, Julian." She walked out, never looking back, even though it felt like her heart was splintering into pieces behind her. Julian stood frozen, staring after her, helpless for the first time in his life. The Manhattan courthouse was cold and solemn, its polished wooden walls and rows of unfamiliar faces adding to the heavy atmosphere. Lena Quinn sat at the defendant's table, her hands tightly clasped on her lap, trying to maintain a calm exterior even as her heart raced wildly. She wore a simple black dress, her hair tied back neatly, but her eyes betrayed the tension she felt. The lawsuit from Blackwood Dynamics loomed over her like a guillotine, threatening to crush Quinn Designs, the small company she had built from dreams and sleepless nights. Across from her sat Blackwood's sharp, confident legal team, piles of thick documents ready to prove that Lena had violated intellectual property rights by using the weather sensor technology in her prototype jacket. Lena had braced herself for this fight, even though her odds were slim. She had only a young, fresh out of law school attorney, paid with the last of her savings. But she couldn't give up, not when everything she loved was on the line. The trial opened with blistering arguments from Blackwood's lead lawyer, a middle-aged man with a deep, booming voice. He outlined how the sensor technology belonged exclusively to Blackwood Dynamics, and how Lena had no right to continue using it after leaving the project. Lena bit her lip, forcing back tears as she listened to her work, her passion, being framed as theft. Then the courtroom doors swung open and a figure stepped inside. A murmur spread through the room. Lena turned and her heart almost stopped. Julian Blackwood, impeccable in a black suit, strode into the courtroom with a commanding presence that couldn't be ignored. He didn't look at her. His gray eyes were focused straight ahead on the judge. A storm of emotions surged through Lena. Anger, hurt, confusion. Was he here to watch her fall? To ensure she lost everything? Blackwood's legal team faltered, clearly unprepared for his arrival. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Blackwood, what is your purpose here?" Julian stood before the bench, his voice low and steady. "Your Honor, I request to testify, but not for the plaintiff. I am here on behalf of the defendant, Miss Lena Quinn." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Lena blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Blackwood's attorneys gaped, while Lena's young lawyer looked utterly bewildered. Julian turned to the judge, speaking with clear, measured authority. "All intellectual property related to the weather sensor technology has been personally licensed by me to Miss Lena Quinn, independent of Blackwood Dynamics. She has full rights to use it. This lawsuit is a mistake." The courtroom erupted into a low wave of gasps and murmurs. Lena gripped her chair, her mind reeling. Julian had said what? He licensed the technology to her? Privately? She stared at him, searching for any sign this was a cruel joke, but his expression was steadfast and unwavering. Blackwood's lead attorney scrambled to stand, voice shaking slightly. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We were not informed." "There is no mistake," Julian cut in, his voice sharp as steel. "I have the full documentation to prove the license transfer, and I will submit it immediately. This lawsuit ends here." After a brief recess to review the documents, the judge announced the trial would be suspended pending dismissal. Lena sat frozen, unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. Julian left the witness stand without looking at her, striding out of the courtroom with the same cool confidence he had entered. But Lena knew this wasn't just another corporate maneuver. Julian Blackwood had just publicly gone against his own company. For her, he was risking his reputation, his position, maybe even his entire career. And somewhere deep inside, beyond the anger and heartbreak, a small flicker of hope reignited. That evening, Lena returned to her small Brooklyn studio, the safe haven where she had moved her operations after leaving Blackwood. The place was as messy as always. Fabric scraps, sketches, and unfinished designs scattered everywhere. But it was hers. She sat at her sewing table, trying to focus on a new dress, but her mind kept drifting back to the courtroom and to Julian. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Firm but not aggressive. Lena frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, she froze. Julian stood there, still in the suit from earlier, his tie loosened, his expression no longer cold and composed, but nervous, almost vulnerable. "Lena," he said, voice rough. "Can I come in?" Lena crossed her arms, blocking the entrance slightly. "Why are you here, Julian? To boast that you saved me in court? Or to present another contract with some hidden trap?" Julian flinched as if her words physically struck him. "No," he said quietly. "I'm here to apologize. And to explain." Lena wanted to slam the door in his face, but something in his voice, a rare, raw sincerity, made her hesitate. She stepped back silently, allowing him inside. Julian stood awkwardly amid the chaos of her studio. He reached into his pocket and placed a small velvet box on her sewing table. Lena frowned. "What's that?" "Open it," Julian said, eyes never leaving hers. Inside the box was 2 crumpled dollar bills, neatly laminated like a precious keepsake. Lena blinked, stunned. She looked back at him. "You kept this?" Julian nodded, a sad smile tugging at his lips. "The moment you handed me those $2 and didn't recognize me, it was the first time in years someone treated me like a regular person. Not a CEO, not a billionaire, just me. I didn't want to lose that." Lena's throat tightened painfully. She clutched the box, tears stinging her eyes. Then why, Julian? Why the contract? Why let me think you betrayed me? Julian exhaled slowly, stepping closer, but not too close. The contract was my mistake, he admitted. It was a standard template my legal team uses. I was so sure your project would succeed that I never thought about adjusting it. When you found out, I wanted to explain, but you wouldn't let me. And the lawsuit, I didn't even know about it until it was too late. I fired the head of legal this morning. Lena stared at him, struggling to process it all. You stood by me today, she said hoarsely, even though it could cost you everything. Julian nodded once. The board is furious. There's an emergency meeting tomorrow. I might be suspended, or worse, but I don't care. He stepped a little closer. I couldn't let you lose everything because of me, Lena. I couldn't live with that. For the first time, Lena didn't see Julian Blackwood, the powerful CEO. She saw a man, a flawed, stubborn, hurting man, willing to risk everything to make things right. She stood just a few feet away from him, her voice trembling. You hurt me, Julian. I trusted you, and I thought it was all just a game. Julian lowered his head, his voice a whisper. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. Lena hesitated, her heart pulling in two directions. Part of her wanted to stay angry to protect herself, but another part, the louder, braver part, wanted to believe him. She held the little box tightly. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said quietly, but I'll think about it. Julian's shoulders relaxed slightly, a flicker of hope in his eyes. That's enough for me. Thank you, Lena. He turned to leave, but she called after him. Julian. He stopped, looking back. Lena smiled slightly, her first real smile in days. Be careful parking. I'm fresh out of $2 tips. Julian chuckled, a low, genuine sound. I'll remember that. And with one last look, he stepped out into the night, leaving Lena holding the small box, and a heart slowly learning how to trust again. The next day, news about Julian's courtroom actions flooded the media. Blackwood's CEO defends small startup against own company, headlines blared. The Blackwood board publicly criticized him, and some shareholders called for his resignation. But Julian didn't appear to defend himself. He disappeared from the spotlight, silent, leaving the world wondering what he was planning next. Meanwhile, Lena sat in her studio, gazing at the box of $2, knowing she needed time to heal. But deep down, she also knew Julian Blackwood had shown her he could put something, or someone, above power and reputation. And that was worth more than all the dollars in the world. She picked up her sketchbook, smiling softly. A new design began to take shape. An AI weather jacket, inspired by dreams, built with stubbornness, laughter, and maybe, just maybe, with love. 6 months later, the Grand Meridian Hotel in New York glittered once again under the dazzling lights, welcoming the second annual Global Young Entrepreneurs Conference. The atmosphere was more electric than ever, filled with fresh faces and new success stories buzzing through the hallways. But this time, the spotlight was firmly fixed on one particular duo walking onto the main stage, Lena Quinn and Julian Blackwood. Lena, now a renowned fashion designer with her brand Quinn Designs, wore a flowy maxi dress she designed herself, paired with a smart weather sensor jacket, the very product that had put her on the map of tech fashion innovation. Standing next to her was Julian, still dressed in his signature black suit, but now wearing a rare, genuine smile that had the whole audience buzzing with curiosity. They weren't just business partners anymore. They had become the symbol of perseverance and collaboration, a real-world fairy tale that had captured headlines ever since their dramatic courtroom showdown 6 months ago. Both had been invited as keynote speakers to share their journey, how a scrappy startup and a billion-dollar tech giant collided to create something extraordinary. Lena took the podium first, confident and charismatic as ever. She spoke about her early days, hustling to get her brand off the ground, even recounting the hilarious mix-up when she handed Julian 2 crumpled dollars, causing the room to erupt in laughter. At that time, Lena said, shooting Julian a playful grin, I thought he was just a valet. Turns out, he was parking something far more important, my heart. The audience burst into thunderous applause and laughter. Julian stood beside her, his gaze warm despite his composed exterior. When it was his turn, he spoke with a deep, steady voice about how Lena had changed not only the project, but also the way he viewed the world. She taught me, he said, eyes fixed tenderly on her, that sometimes a little chaos is necessary to create something truly remarkable, and that a CEO should lead not just with reason, but with heart. He paused and the room held its breath. And if you ever mistake a CEO for a valet, he added, lips twitching into a rare smile, you might be right, because I find myself parking her heart in mine every single day. The entire hall exploded into applause and cheers. Lena covered her mouth, laughing and blushing fiercely. You have no shame, she whispered, giggling through her tears of joy. But Julian wasn't finished. To everyone's astonishment, he slowly got down on one knee and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. The room fell into stunned silence before erupting into wild cheers when he opened it, revealing a dazzling diamond ring. Lena froze, her hand flying to her chest, eyes wide with shock. Lena Quinn, Julian said, his voice rough but clear, carrying across the hall. 6 months ago, I almost lost you because of my own stupidity. But you gave me a second chance, and every day since then, you've made me a better man. I can't promise to be perfect, but I promise to love you and stand by you for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down Lena's cheeks, but her smile outshone every spotlight in the room. She nodded fervently, voice trembling. Yes, Julian. Yes! Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, stood, and pulled her into a fierce hug. The crowd roared with applause, a few even wiping away tears. Lena, overwhelmed but happy, whispered into his ear, You're absolutely outrageous. Proposing in front of 1,000 people? Julian chuckled, brushing a kiss against her forehead. For you, nothing is too much. After the conference, Lena and Julian sat tucked away in a cozy cafe near the hotel, golden lamplight casting a warm glow around them. Lena twirled her new engagement ring around her finger, still trying to process everything that had happened. You know, she said, sipping her latte, I still haven't completely forgiven you for that $2 stunt. Keeping it like some kind of sacred treasure. Seriously weird. Julian laughed, pulling out a small laminated case from his pocket, the 2 crumpled dollars preserved inside. It's the beginning of our story, he said, smiling. I'm keeping it forever. Lena mock glared at him, but couldn't hide the smile tugging at her lips. You're absolutely insane, but I like you that way. They sat hand in hand, talking about the future, about expanding Quinn Designs, about the travels they wanted to take together, and about a wedding Lena swore would be just as outrageously bold as you are. 6 months ago, Lena could never have imagined herself falling in love with Julian Blackwood, the man she once thought of as cold and arrogant. But now he was the person she wanted to share every moment with. Julian looked at her, his eyes full of warmth. Thank you, Lena, for not giving up on me. Lena shrugged, grinning mischievously. Well, call it charity work. But next time you make me mad, I'm tipping you $5 and making you take out the trash. Julian laughed heartily, pulling her closer. Deal. That night, as they walked through the glittering streets of New York hand in hand, they weren't a CEO and a designer anymore. They weren't rivals or survivors of misunderstandings. They were simply 2 people who had found each other through chaos, mistakes, and fate. Lena looked up at Julian, and in his eyes she saw their whole future, a life filled with laughter, bickering, adventures, and unshakable love. And somewhere deep in Julian's pocket, the 2 laminated dollars stayed tucked away, a small, perfect reminder that sometimes the silliest moments lead to forever.